Welcome to the October 28th meeting of the Franklin Board of Education. The meeting has been properly posted. Mr. Alexandrowicz is excused. Mrs. Larson, can we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Mr. Gamble?
Present.
Mrs. Witkowski?
Here.
Mr. Lewis?
Here.
Mr. Sprague?
Here.
Mrs. Sapersky?
Here.
And I am also here.
Thank you. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'm looking for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Witkowski,
Second.
second by Mr. Sprague. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Community comment period. Participants need to come forward to the mic and state your name and address. Statements are limited to 3 minutes with a maximum of 15 minutes for any and all comments. If the community comment relates to an agenda item, the board may respond to that comment either at the end of the community comment session or during the discussion of that agenda item. The board may not discuss a comment or question that does not relate to agenda items per Board Policy Administrative Rules number 8300. Would anyone like to come forward for community comment? Yes, sir. Step forward.
Good evening.
Welcome.
My name is Steve Wamser, 7956 South Scepter Drive, Franklin. I attended your meeting last month, and I wanted to just speak again. So first of all, just like I said last month, I'm thrilled that you have the kids in school this year. I know some other communities have closed schools, and so we appreciate that you're doing that. I did have, there's just been some things. Last month I talked about how my teenager was quarantined for a couple weeks because a kid in his class had COVID, so he was home from school, which I think that's too much. President Donald Trump said the other day, and he said this before, the cure can't be worse than the problem. And kids, we live in a two-parent community, or community where both parents work often. So, like when my son was home from school, he's home alone. So he's safer at school than he is at home. So, you know, where we have this community burden and all these other things that you're trying to measure, I think kids being home is going to lead to worse things. Obesity, depression, poor grades, stunting their development, playing too many video games, all these other things that come with it. We've had over 200-something thousands of cases of COVID in Wisconsin. There's still 100% survival rate for kids under 19 years old. So thank you for keeping them in school. I know there's what we're calling an outbreak or whatever you're wanting to call it, but we're testing these kids like crazy. These kids are getting tested all the time. They don't even know they have it half the time. So I'm here tonight to say, please keep them in school. I also got an email from the rec department. I don't think that's affiliated with you guys, is it? Or you are? Okay, great. So all cases are canceled for the all the rec department activities are canceled I got last week. I've got kids in all three schools, grade school, middle school, elementary school. Last month, I don't think Jordan Heim is here tonight, but he had a presentation about how important sports and after-school activities are to kids' development. But now we have no activities for kids K through 8 this winter. So as important as those things are, we have nothing for them to do. So, and as a taxpayer, I don't know, everybody that I've dealt with at the rec department has been great, from Chris Russo to Paul Janke to these people. But I think they're still getting paid, so I don't know what they're doing. But if there's no rec department, I don't know why they're getting paid. So that's something that should, that should be addressed, I think. But I want the sports back. I want my kids to have stuff to do this winter. Playing video games is not the answer, what can you do to get the rec department back on track? Basketball, wrestling, all those other activities, I see no reason why we shouldn't have those. Again, 100% survival rate, 200,000 cases, kids under 19. Lastly, I saw on the news, I don't know what the accuracy is on this, but that 70-something teachers in Franklin filed a grievance and are looking to cancel school because they're nervous about COVID-19, I suppose. That's true, right?
I'm sorry.
That 75 teachers filed grievances in Franklin, is that accurate?
There was a grievance filed.
Okay. So again, you look at the mortality rate, and it's not high, You're more than likely to get killed in a car crash or from cancer or from obesity or from anything else. So I don't know what the game plan is for that, or, they're part of the teachers union or whatever, but we need leaders like you guys, and we appreciate it, but we need people to step up and keep these kids in school and squash that stuff, because if they're not going to teach, I'll volunteer to teach. We taught the kids at home a little bit, we're getting used to it, so if the teachers don't want to teach, other people can come in and teach for them, but just having the kids at home is not the answer. So that's what I'm here to talk about today. I mean, we're testing all these people, and there's a lot of other professionals out there that are working amidst the COVID-19 epidemic, including all of you guys, including the cashier at Walgreens or at the gas station, or at Sendik's or Pick and Save or Menards or Home Depot. So I found it, I was surprised to hear that they filed the grievance. I know that's not you guys, but we need to keep them in school. So remember, we started this whole mess in the middle of March to flatten the curve so the hospitals aren't overwhelmed. They've never been overwhelmed. We set up a hospital at State Fair that was never used. I think they set it up again. It's not being used again. So we're not overwhelmed. I think we need to pivot a little bit. I mean, there's so many layers of government piled on top of each other, from the Franklin government to the CDC to what you guys are doing. I mean, the state of Wisconsin Badgers, their kid's out 21 days because he has COVID. He doesn't even know he has COVID. He's the healthiest kid. He's a 21-year-old athlete. So it's crazy, and we need to pivot and realize that it's time to go back, start going back to life as normal, So that's my plea for you, is to try and keep kids at school. So any questions about my speech? Thank you
for
for your
sharing with us.
time. I will see you next month. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing with us. Would anyone else like to comment? Would anyone else like to comment? Hearing none, we'll move on. Close the community comments period. I'm looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Sprague,
Second.
second by Mr. Lewis. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? None. Motion passes. Item 6, do we have any school board announcements from the board members?
Mr. Gamble, if I could make an announcement, please?
Yes.
The Wisconsin Association of School Boards recognizes board members who participate in leadership and board development. And I'm proud this evening to provide Mr. Gamble with an award from the Wisconsin Association of School Boards. And you receive a pin and this nice certificate. And thank you very much for your leadership.
Thank you. Any other school board announcements? Okay. School board calendar. We have a regular board meeting on November 11th at 6 p.m. here in the ECC, and a regular board meeting on December 9th at 6 p.m. here at the ECC. Item 8, district administrator update from Dr. Miller.
Good evening. Thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you very much. Just a few updates. We started this week with a professional development day. We really value these days with our teachers. They engage 100% of the time in new learning. In the morning this Monday, they continued the work we've already been working on with regard to equity and social emotional learning, learning more about some inclusion activities. In the afternoon, our schools work together on their school improvement plans and their goals, focusing on collective efficacy and the mind frames work that we're doing. So it was a very productive day. It was 100% virtual. All of our staff was here, but they were all in their individual spaces and working together. We've been conducting our parent-teacher conferences. Some of you are parents in the audience may have had an opportunity to participate in a virtual parent-teacher conference. I think this is one of those things that is positive about COVID. It's opened the door to doing things a little differently, and I believe a number of our parents have really enjoyed the opportunity to conference with teachers virtually. So those occurred at the elementary school and at the high school and will occur in November at Forest Park. There's a rating that comes out by an organization called Niche, and the 2021 rating just recently came out. They're an organization that rates schools by collecting data from dozens of different public data sources and then reviews from students and families and community members. And Franklin, again, did very well in this rating. Franklin Public Schools rated in the top 10% of the best schools in America. In Wisconsin, we rated number 5 in athletes, and that's out of 371 school districts. We rated number 7 in Wisconsin as the best place to teach, and we ranked overall as the 24th best school district in the state of Wisconsin. So we have a lot to be proud of, but you know, you hear me talk all the time about we care about and work on getting better all the time. One of the things that's happening this week is we're surveying our parents who are at home with their students learning virtually at the middle and high school to ask them if they intend to return to in-person learning. So we're really early in that data. The survey doesn't close till early next week, Monday. But the data that we have now, again, very early, is trending that about 20% of those virtual families are interested in coming back to in-person learning. So again, that data could be very different by next week, but that's what we're seeing at this point. Pleasant View office renovation is coming along really, really well. We're really excited to say that after Thanksgiving, we'll open up the new office. And for those of you who don't know about that renovation, it occurred because Pleasant View is the only school in the district that didn't have a secure entrance. In other words, you entered the building before you got to the school office. So that is coming along very well, and we'll be seeing that opening up right around the end of November. And then finally, COVID-19, of course, is always part of my update. We're all very aware that the community spread in Franklin and in the state is high. And it is having somewhat of an impact on our school district, but we still remain green with our positivity rate for staff and students who are testing positive. So we care very much about the burden rate, but what's important to us is how that burden rate is impacting our schools and the students in them. So we're looking at all of those metrics very carefully. And again, overall, our positivity rate is still within that green area of our metrics. We have seen an increase in the number of high school students testing positive. And sadly, I'm also hearing about a number of gatherings that are occurring with our high school students. So I'm really imploring our families to prevent this from happening so that our high school students can remain at our high school and we don't have to quarantine more students. That would conclude my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Miller. Item 9, reports, presentations, and other school board business. First, we have our annual health report. Ms. Call and Ms. O'Neill.
Sorry, put it just a bit closer to your face, Ms. O'Neill. Yeah, I kind of lean into it, so.
There you go.
Hello, good evening. So thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to speak with you tonight regarding the health and nursing services provided to the district in the 2019-2020 school year. My name is Lori O'Neill, and I'm here with Molly Call. We are the district nurses that cover the elementary school, middle school, high school, and rec department. As in past years, we've spent a great deal of time supporting students with chronic health conditions. While the number of conditions reported for students show the highest volume with asthma and life-threatening allergies, we spend the most significant amount of time ensuring that students with diabetes are able to manage their condition and minimize the time that they must be out of the classroom as a result of complications from their disease. Of note, we maintained and communicated 179 individualized health plans for students across all levels, which are used to communicate with school staff how to care for and respond to students with unique medical needs. Over half of those health plans are for individuals with life-threatening allergies, and an additional 20% of health plans give directions to care for and respond to individuals having a medical emergency related to diabetes or seizures. We also find that our ability to deliver complex hands-on nursing care, either directly from us or by our trained health room staff, continues to be essential to allowing students equitable access to instruction and minimize health-related interruptions to their school day. We are immensely proud of the work we have done with emergency preparedness and the emergency response teams and the development that have occurred in each of our buildings. We completed drills in partnership with Chief Remington and the Franklin Fire Department multiple times throughout the course of the school year in every building to ensure our teams are prepared to respond in a variety of scenarios.
Our comprehensive training program, in addition to our development of a cardiac emergency response plan, allowed each of our buildings to demonstrate evidence of meeting criteria to obtain a heart-safe school designation through Project Adam with Children's Hospital of Wisconsin, a goal that took almost a year of work to achieve. Also, as a direct outcome of that training, our teams appropriately escalated the care of individuals in need by contacting emergency medical services for assistance on 8 different occasions between the start of the school year and mid-March. Each of those individuals in need of care was then transported to a hospital for further interventions and was able to safely return to school. Most importantly, in 2 of these occurrences, the individuals receiving health services for an emergency situation were experiencing heart rhythms that would have been fatal without immediate care and intervention, and were able to eventually return to school without any long-term physical adverse outcomes. In the spring of 2020, the World Health Organization declared a global pandemic as we learned that a novel coronavirus, or COVID-19, would quickly cause the spread of infection in our community. A considerable amount of time was dedicated to assessing and evaluating guidance from local, state, and national health organizations regarding the impact of the virus in a school setting and with regards to the pediatric population. Since that time, we have worked to ensure that staff, students, and families have access to up-to-date, accurate, and relevant information needed for both their own health promotion and for the wellness of those around them. Significant time and resources were spent strengthening partnerships with public health providers, notably the Franklin Health Department, in order to develop a process for sharing mutual information in order to maintain the safety of our students and staff. These are just a few of our highlights from our report that was shared with you guys, but of course we want to give you the opportunity to ask any questions about information that you reviewed in the report or clarifications that you would like to make, anything along those lines.
Mr. Sprague. Good.
We talked a lot last year before COVID started about vaping, and I haven't heard a thing about it this year. I'm wondering, I'm guessing it's hard to vape with the mask on, but I'm wondering what you're hearing either anecdotally or
Yeah.
what's happening with that.
That's a great question. What I primarily focus a lot of my efforts at the high school, and we have an amazing team there working that has not lost sight of the fact that when you talk about words like epidemic and pandemic, a lot of times in the past prior to COVID-19, that was referring to vaping in our younger populations. So we are certainly still dedicating a lot of energy in that area. As far as concrete data to include, Lori and I are both excited, as are a lot of other members of our team, to resurvey, hopefully, our students at Forest Park and the high school. Ideally, it would be this school year. We work in partnership with the Franklin Health Department to get that information for youth risk behaviors scale. So we ask students information about decisions that they make that would potentially impact their health. That survey was last done not in the 2019-2020 school year, but the prior school year. And because vaping was a newer trend in 2018, 2019, that was the first time we asked our student population questions related to, have you ever vaped? Have you ever tried it? Or have you done it within the last 30 days? So that will give us some good concrete information within our community about what trends are looking like. You're completely correct that if we looked only at data related to what do we see during the course of an academic day, students wearing masks will impact our ability to get trends around whether or not students vaping has increased or has not increased or decreased. Looking at statewide data as far as reporting goes, we haven't seen much of a trend change over the last year or two. So we suspect that that's definitely an area of children's health that we still need to focus energy on.
I don't have a question necessarily. I just wanted to say thank you for all that you're doing. Reading this report was overwhelming to me to think of how much you're doing, and knowing that this was all before COVID really started and seeing how much you're doing now. I just wanted to say thanks for everything that you're doing. That's not nearly enough, but thank you, because it's really phenomenal work that you are doing.
Just one technical question. Naloxone, that's Narcan?
Correct.
Just a question on the immunization compliance rate, the drop there. I mean, last year's report, we were at 99.87, and that was where we were at for 19 years, and now this year we're at 95.4%. I know, what are your thoughts on that? And especially with, if there is a, if COVID-19 does have will parents be willing, or where do you see that going?
Sure. That's a great question, and we noticed that significant drop too, and we've been noticing an increase in our personal waivers. That percentage is going up, so I think that has impacted our numbers. The state reported data to us, specifically around compliance, looked a little bit different this year, so we actually are digging into that a little bit deeper to find out some of that additional information. Of course, we continue to advocate for immunizations in compliance with the law and recommendations with the American Academy of Pediatrics. So know that we are continuing to do that work.
So are you relying then on parents reporting that, or does the state have a database that you?
The state has a database that we utilize as well. So it's a partnership with both our community partners and pediatricians, the state database, and of course, we do need to partner with our parents as well.
It would seem like if the numbers went down that much, it would almost have to be incoming students. I mean, if everybody had their immunizations up to date last year, and now they don't.
There are a few different age brackets where new immunizations are required. So Lori and I, in partnership with our health room staff, focus a lot of energy on getting information from those specific areas. So 6th grade is always one that we pay a lot of attention to, making sure that those parents understand the new requirements, that our community partners are communicating that to children. And you're completely right that this year we're focusing extra energy on making sure that families can get access to primary care or locations where they can get those immunizations updated, because we know that there are additional barriers to that we'll have to help people out with.
So do we think that's part of the issue, is that they're not going to doctors because of COVID? So they're not getting
Because
the
this information
immunizations
was
they would
from the
normally
previous
get.
school year, COVID wouldn't have impacted those numbers, but
Oh,
it's
okay,
something that we're
okay.
thinking forward to, of that if we saw that dip last year, we want to make sure that we get ahead of it
Okay.
prior to this year.
No other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very informative.
I also would like to thank you both very much, and you should go home and rest.
Next is our Community and Recreation Department report from Mr. Anderson.
I would also like to thank you for having me here tonight to talk about our department. Back in March, when the state mandate came down that the school district must close, obviously most of the recreation programs shut down up until the first part of July. In the report that you guys have, you can see that the numbers that we had, not only in participants but in revenue, were up for the same time last year. And when you look at where they ended up kind of stopping in March, there were actually some programs and some facility usage that was actually more than the previous year without having those additional months of usage. We started back up in July with some programming. We did do youth programming in the summer, very limited, and we did some adult programming to gauge the interest of the community. We also worked with the school district and the health department on some best practices and how we would move forward with programming in the fall. We did not run any youth programs in the fall. We did do the before and after school care program at all 5 elementary schools and have done adult programming and some adult sports outside and now inside here in the fall. We are looking at the potential of trying to do some things, best practices related for youth going into the early winter here, and then hopefully being able to run some of our sports leagues late winter, early spring, rolling into summer camp, all predicated on what happens with COVID. Moving forward, I guess the best case scenario is, we get into spring here and we're back to normal for programming. Facility usage kind of mirrored those same type of requests. We had some sports teams and some of the travel teams that were trying to get into the gyms like they typically do, partnering with the school district. And then coming into the fall as a district and the health department, we thought that that probably wasn't the best case scenario because a lot of those teams, if you're a second grade basketball team, you can have second graders from all 5 elementary schools. And we wanted to minimize the contact that those kids had with each other so that we could see how that would play out during the fall. Looking at our sports leagues for adults, our pickleball has started, our indoor badminton has started. We are requiring adults obviously to wear masks, social distance, and the custodians' workload is also a factor for this. We're looking at what they can handle for cleaning and make sure that the school day is ready the next day. So that's another reason why when we looked at some of the programming in the fall, we wanted to make sure that we had the care program put in place that people were looking for in March and in the summer, and to know that the custodians could handle that workload. And working with Casey, the head of buildings and grounds, we looked at that and we converted some of the weekend staff to the daytime and evening on the weekdays to help disinfect the schools. So with that being said, I had the report, and I don't know if you guys have any questions about programming previously or facility usage or what we're doing now.
Just a question on Forest Park. I see that the hours are up there significantly, even with the March shutdown. Looks like you're at 3463 hours versus 2548 in previous years. So what has that additional space really meant in terms of additional usage?
The new gym.
Who's using it? I mean,
Yeah,
who's using it?
When the new gym came online, we made a conscious effort to not book things back to back in that facility on weekends to let the custodians get used to that, learn the systems. So that basically is a direct result of tournaments, leagues, things that were sponsored by the school district at Forest Park in the gym. If you remember the old Forest Park, that gym wouldn't have really held anything that would have been tournament related or anything after school related. So those basically are just all of the leagues and things that are happening at Forest Park up until March.
And they weren't transfers from other buildings? This is all new?
I would say probably 50% of it was new. There were some things that were transferred out of the high school, some tournaments and things that were sports related. Like you'll see the varsity basketball teams all typically have a tournament fundraiser. The Palms had a cheerleading and had clinics and invites that they had going on. Those were put over at Forest Park. So I would say 50% of it was new because these sports teams had access to a larger facility that would allow them to run that. On weekends at the high school, that gym is still used for B team games in the wintertime. And then you've got other teams trying to come in and practice. So that is a direct reflection of the fact that Forest Park's new gym was online and that these sports teams could move some things over, but they also added some things to help fundraise for their teams.
And is it just the gym? There's other spaces too that were?
We stuck strictly with the gym this last year for the weekends. During the week, we obviously moved our cooking classes over there into that state-of-the-art facility from the high school. We had moved some other recreation classes over there during the weeknights, but on the weekends, that's strictly what it was.
Okay, so there's still that potential to even open that up also.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So going forward, we have definitely addressed some of that demand for space?
Yeah, the gymnasium at the middle school has really become kind of a hub for the high school. Within reason, I mean, it's a perfect place to do their fundraisers on weekends. The Forest Park is usually out of the gym by 5:30, 6 o'clock. So you've got Special Olympics in there that has a practice slot typically. We've got pickleball in there in the wintertime. On Saturdays, we will run our rec basketball out of their grade level. So there's still a lot more room at the middle school in that gymnasium. We just don't want to overwhelm it to begin with the first couple of years and burn out the crew. And we were very conscious about the requests we had from outside the district wanting to rent that facility and knowing that the ownership of people potentially coming in outside the community wouldn't be the same as if we were in there using it. We wanted to help protect that facility.
Right, thank you.
Are other rec departments, I assume they're in the exact same spot? I mean, there's nobody in Wisconsin running programs, or very little, I would expect. Is that the case?
It really depends upon where you're at. Muskego being run by the city has different rules and regulations than a school district did with COVID, and even coming out of it. So Muskego is a little bit more wide open than what Franklin is. Greendale's a split. They're run by the city and the school district. So they've run some things, but most everybody has had to pare back programming from what they would want to, or at least pare back numbers. I know in this general area, there are some programs that are running, like Muskego's youth sports teams are run through their associations. It's not typically run through the school district or through the city. The associations set up with the school district to rent the gyms, and then they run their leagues out of it, much like our travel teams would have done, or like to have done.
Thank you.
So why not have the like youth basketball and let the parent decide if they're willing to sign up their kids or not, rather than have the decision made by the rec department or, or the school board?
Yeah, unfortunately, this is not an interactive conversation.
If you'd like to discuss it after the meeting, we'd be happy to chat with you.
No problem, or if you
Yeah.
guys want to ask that question.
Yeah, no, if you stay afterwards, I'd be happy to talk with you about it.
Sounds good.
Any other questions from board members?
Yeah, if you're closing down programs and not running things, and this is partially a question to Jim, how is this going to affect the money that's been allocated to the rec department?
The rec department budget was reduced somewhat because of what's going on right now. But when Mr. Anderson and I talked, we had hoped to regain some of that momentum, possibly in the spring, by taking things that would have been run in the fall and running them in the spring instead. So it didn't completely drop away, but it is less than it was in the first draft of the budget. But we're still looking at things getting at least somewhat better in the spring and being able to run some things.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Anderson. And before we get to Ms. Ellihausen and the enrollment and staffing report, Dr. Miller requested a moment to introduce the next two items.
The next two items include the enrollment and staffing report and our 2020-21 budget approval. And I just want to say that I'm really proud of the work that's been done, both in terms of our staffing and this budget. I'd ask that the board please allow Ms. Ellihausen to go through her full report and then have Mr. Milzer also go through the budget report prior to discussion or questions, because they really are very paired together. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Ellihausen.
Good evening, members of the board and members of the community. Tonight I will go through the enrollment report that is in your packet. I'm going to pick a couple of the graphs to highlight, talk a little bit about, and then close with the staffing piece. So in your packet where you see the first graph around the third Friday, that is our enrollment as of the 5-year look back period you see there. And our most recent enrollment of 4,668 does represent a decrease this school year over last school year. That is not atypical of the area. Seeing what is transpiring as a result of the pandemic, I'll talk a little bit about certain areas coming up that are affected that will explain some of those differential pieces, as well as the fact that you've heard me speak now for multiple years, and so I'll just remind us that those lower primary numbers are smaller than the upper grade levels as a result of birth rates and national trends around birth rates that Franklin is experiencing, just like other areas certainly are. So we see a 79 student decrease for this school year over last school year in that third Friday graph you see in page 2. When you look at the breakdown by the levels, elementary, middle, and high, you will see that the number at the elementary is the highest number of reduced count between the two school years. And you actually see a slight increase in the middle school enrollment and the high school enrollment, but between those three, you will still net to that 79 with a 96 student reduction being presented there at the elementary schools. When you look at our elementary school breakdown, again, remember in those bar graphs there that are represented that the past two school years, this one and the one prior, represent that grade level configuration that we experienced when the new Forest Park opened and we added our 4K, our littlest learners into the mix. But you can see that overall there is some reduction in the elementary schools, but there's also growth at Southwood Glen, which if you recall back to May when I presented the preliminary staffing report, we talked a little bit about that growth at Southwood Glen and being able to staff accordingly to make sure that we have our class sizes in line as that school grows. When you look at that average class size K-8, that is our in-person grade level class sizes. And the focus has been down in that K1-2 area to ensure that we have smaller class sizes as we try to ensure our safety protocols are met with the highest expectations and we're able to socially distance the littlest of students that are oftentimes a little more mobile than the biggest of students. So it was important to put some resources there. The other thing I'd like to point out as you look at this graph is this year is a bit of an anomaly, right? We have our virtual students, and some of them certainly, as you can imagine, didn't come neatly out of each school or each grade level. And so there's some variation or swing in our class sizes as a result of making sure we accommodated the virtual learners into their classrooms as well. So that's represented here when you look at now the range of the numbers, which is normally, if you go back to prior reports, more tight than this year. But also, as Dr. Miller pointed out, as we watch the secondary or Forest Park in the high school survey that is out, we will also have to survey a little bit later here for our elementary to determine if they also would like to return to in-person learning. And in order for us to do that and be really well prepared as we worked as a team to staff and ensure that we were able to take those students back into the mix, we knew that certain grade levels needed to have room in order to accommodate movement in and out of the virtual environment at the transition points we agreed to. When you look at the grade level enrollment, that will show you the actual student numbers as of this past October, so not the third Friday count, this past October. We felt it was important that you actually do see how our grade levels break down between the in-person and the virtual students in our system here today. And as you look at that graph, I would also say pay attention, right, to those lower primary numbers where you see, just based upon the size of the graph, that we have a smaller total number of students in those areas than we do on that upper end of the range, and that has been customarily coming as we've done this enrollment report for the past 3 to 4 years. So you see that total K population right now for Franklin, we sit at 265, where we have experienced over my tenure here and this presenting this report, class sizes in the 300s. So again, lower primary numbers representative of those national trends and those birth rates. But that shows you the breakdown between those two student populations. Overall, we are down the 79 students, but we still show in that trend line an upward trend line. So that's good for us that we are able, again, to watch our enrollment, and we still see growth in our area in order to help stabilize some of those variations that otherwise come from those trends in the birth rates. I spoke to the class size variation, and that's important to just note. And that's an anomaly, hopefully, right, for this school year, that we needed to make sure that we were properly planned for in order to accommodate our parent requests. When we look a little bit at staffing in the last half of the report here, I do a report in May, which is very preliminary, keeps me very busy in the summer, making sure we are getting ready. Gives you a preview of where we're heading as you approve contracts and see changes that come throughout the summer. And now we've settled. We're not completely settled. We're never completely settled, but we're pretty darn settled. So this is where we sit today, and we sit with 8.03, but 8 FTE higher this year than in the past, and we're certainly up since I did the report in May. But as you can imagine, there's been a lot of changes and shifting and adjusting this past summer to make sure that we can accommodate both our in-person and our virtual learners, and our staff have the resources they need to do that. So we certainly have added positions over the course of the summer in order to make that happen, and you've been informed along the way, so certainly this is not a surprise to you. But this is where we've settled in with about 8 FTE higher than the year prior. In terms of turnover, it's lower than it has been in the past, but again, early in the region, we're a little bit early for the regional data to be presented to you. Our group typically has that done in the month of November. But this has been pretty much what is seen in other districts. There's just a little bit more of a stability in staff staying in the districts that they know, because changing right now is a little bit of a challenge, and there's instability in any movement between districts or positions. So I'm not surprised that we see a lower trend in the turnover line sitting around 6%. And then you see our resignations, our retirements, and positions that were new broken down there. Then again, when you go back to the staffing report from May, there's a lot of shifts and adjustments just naturally in the way we staff based upon course enrollments, where kid numbers move through the system as they change between buildings or levels. And in closing there, you see a little bit of the data that helps you understand when we conduct the exit surveys, what feedback we're given, and why people did indeed choose to leave Franklin. I also point out in there that we certainly did have some staff leave as a result of COVID and what is occurring with the pandemic, and that certainly was expected and anticipated. And then lastly, I would close with the wonderful numbers we see down there on the recommendations that staff do for Franklin, which is certainly reflective of the niche score we receive in being a great place to work. So that's my report. I will certainly, as we get to the close, as I turn it over here to Mr. Milzer, answer any questions when we get to that point.
Thank you.
All right, well, we started with the first draft of the budget in June, and we talked about the fact that that was based on a lot of estimates at that point. In this final draft, we have the information from the state on our funding for October. You've just heard about our enrollment. We've got those counts. All of the staffing updates are done. And overall, the district will receive just over $1 million more in equalization aid than we had in draft number 1. At that time, we were not sure that the state funding would occur as planned in the state budget. It appears now that it will. So all of that's been included. And with all of that there, the budget has the same total tax levy as last year, so no tax increase overall. Obviously, COVID's the big story. Usually we do have changes from the first draft till now. There's just a lot more than there have been in the past. A lot of personnel changes. In non-personnel expenses, we'll end up spending about $400,000 on sanitizing machines, drums of hand sanitizer, signage, water bottle filling stations, partitions, teaching supplies, some extra technology for our virtual teachers. We've added additional bus routes, which we wanted to do last year but couldn't do. We managed to get that done this year, and it helped to keep our students to a seat. We've also added the sanitizing procedures on all of the buses, both the large buses and the small buses, in between routes and in the evening. We've had a few more students open and roll out, I think probably to virtual academies for the year, which is costing about $130,000 more than it did last year. But overall, this is an excellent budget for Franklin Public Schools. It moves our coherence plan forward, our equity work forward, includes the initiatives that we've talked about throughout the year, covers all of those COVID-related expenses, and it provides the type of education that the parents have chosen for their students for this year. And it does all that with no tax increase. So this evening, be happy to answer questions. We just have to adopt the budget so that we can file our tax forms with the city and the state in the next week.
Any questions from the board members?
Just a question on the, the enrollment matters in terms of the formula and when our virtual students, and I know that in person, they have to be in the seat, that's how they call it, the third Friday count, right? You have to be there. How did they handle virtual students? Did they have to be online at a certain time, or was there any issues with counting them?
No, I don't think there's any issues with counting them. If they're signed up as to be a member of our district and are online with our teachers, then we were able to count them. And just like in a regular count, the student, although there's a one day that the count is done, if the student is there a day before that and a day after that, they can also be counted. So you're not penalized just because a student is absent that day. So we're able to count our virtual students the same way. Our teachers are seeing them, they know that they're there, and we can count them.
Okay. You mentioned that birth rates are kind of contributing to the lower grades. What about what's happening in the housing market and housing starts in Franklin? What kind of potential do you take that into account in terms of enrollment potential growth?
We certainly do. There are working subdivisions in Franklin again after really a long hiatus. And that's one of the reasons that you're seeing Southwood Glen increase in the number of students there. We'll see other schools as well when this development on 76th Street in Oakwood really gets going. And I imagine there will be others as the economy continues to improve. And I know there are still people looking for houses. The housing market is still short of what people would really like. So I know we'll see more in Franklin, and we do take that into account for the future.
It certainly helps for us to smooth some of those, otherwise what could be sharper declines, given the overall trends around the birth rates. Our growth does that for us. And so, yes, we look at that as we, again, go back to May. We knew the Southwood Glen number, this number that you see on that chart wasn't a surprise. We knew that growth was there, and thus we staffed accordingly back in the spring to make sure their class sizes were where they needed to be.
What will happen, we have 8 extra staff, or new staff from last year. Post-COVID, what will happen to those positions? Are they contracted workers for a year, or are we going to be 8 people less? What's going to happen?
Especially because we have 79 less students, and then you see 8 more staff.
Yeah. I don't have a crystal ball, but we do issue them as limited term contracts, which means their contracts do not renew for next school year. So as I staff, I'm paying attention to the fact that, one, we want to be very transparent with anyone that accepts a position here in terms of that stability or guarantee, so that it's very clear up front they're limited term contracts. And then that also helps when I get to the spring to make sure that we can bring the numbers down to the levels that they need to be at without forcing layoffs unnecessarily. And then if indeed things are still stable in terms of growth, or we have areas that are improved, those individuals can certainly apply for the open positions that we have. It's a wonderful opportunity because we know them so well. We've seen them on the job, and we can, fast track them into the positions and secure them for the following school year when need be.
When we're counting the people at the schools, for the elementary schools, is it the kids? Is it the school that they would normally go to, even if they're virtual?
It's their home school, yes.
I have a question regarding and I don't know whether this is for Judy or who this is for, but right now at the high school, there's just a hair over 15% of the students virtual. At what point, or have we talked about at what point we would say, okay, that's not enough students to really go virtual and everybody's just going to go full-time? I mean, is it 8%, is it 10%, or what is that number that doesn't make sense for us to have a dual system?
Did you want to try to take it, or otherwise I will?
I don't know that I know the exact answer because I would say it depends
Well,
on.
if we haven't thought about it, I would suggest that we do draw a line in the sand somewhere and think about that as far as when does it make sense just to say, okay, we're gonna cut it off here and just go all
So
in
with,
person.
with the many, many different courses that are
Yeah.
offered at the high school, it would really, we'd have to look at, what we can do based on the kinds of courses that those students who need to remain in virtual need to be enrolled in, and how we could put that together. Maybe they don't get to take the exact course they want to take second semester because we can't offer that one virtually. But, potentially there are people who absolutely need to remain virtual because they live with a family member who has a health condition that's going to make it really difficult for them to attend. And rather than lose them to some virtual school outside of our district, we're going to make an effort to try to make that work.
But don't we have to look at the financial aspect of that also? Because maybe it would make more sense for us to subsidize that virtual, that student in some other virtual learning environment rather than providing it ourselves.
Right. We'll have to look at all of that, and I think we'll have that data sooner than later, right, Mr. Cohn?
Yeah, by
Or Dr.
Monday.
Cohn?
Yeah.
Did you want to add to that at all? Because you really do provide a lot of help building that schedule.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know that there's an exact number there, as they said. I think it comes down to the variety of courses and what we're offering and what a full section looks like and whether or not we have the staffing to move forward with that. But I agree. I think at this point, we're trying to make our best effort to offer the programming that supports, again, those families with medical conditions or a medically fragile child who just isn't comfortable or can't be in the building right now, that we would try to support and subsidize in some other way anyway. So I think that data will come in, we'll take a close look at it, we'll look at the schedule and the courses that we're looking to offer, and then we'll continue to move forward from there. So.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly are going to look at the overall section size, right? I mean, 15 is about the minimum needed in order to run that section, but there are times, even when we staffed the current virtual model where we stacked classes, or we asked that student to switch, or we paired up different scenarios in order to make sure we were maximizing the resources that we had. So it'll be the same methodology when we see the numbers as they come into play.
Question, Jim, you mentioned, we've seen the private voucher school payments go up dramatically again, 572,000. And that's from the proposed budget. It's even more from the last year, correct?
It's more from the previous year too, yes.
So, I mean, that's $500,000 there. Where do you see that going? And how is it really, or do we pay for that? Is that in our levy, or?
Yes. Yes, that's the number that the state gives us in October, and they ask us to list it as an expense and in our revenue limit. So it in effect increases our tax levy by $500,000 plus, and then we levy for that money, and at the end of the year, they take it away from us and give it to the private schools.
But in this budget, though, equalization aid in effect covered that, because we don't have any levy increase, so that, is that true to say that the equalization increase funded that? I mean, the levy didn't increase,
Yeah, I
so.
would say, no, it's in the tax levy, but the tax levy was
Just
held
switched
down
around.
by, by the equalization aid. And I pointed out because there are other programs, and we've got those, I think, in the first draft document, where there is money coming away from the district going to other private programs. But this one is very large, and I think this is only the third year that they've done it this way. And it seems to be growing at a large rate, and it's just a fact that people need to be aware of.
And this is a number that the state gives us that we have to just add to the tax roll.
Exactly.
Okay.
Is there detail behind those numbers? Do we know exactly where that money is going?
No, they don't, I don't know. They don't give us any detail on it.
Can we
It
ask
just-
for it?
I will.
Don't you think, as long as I'm paying for it as a taxpayer, shouldn't I know where that money's going?
I would agree.
Not just into a black hole?
I would agree. Yeah. I'll see what I can get
Could
for
you do
that.
that?
Mhm.
because it represents private school students in our community. Is that what it means?
Right.
The
It
idea?
represents Franklin students that are going to other private schools, and we're funding it.
In
So
Franklin?
I want to know where that money's going, to what schools?
Well, since it comes as a directive from the state to collect that, and it goes to the state, it might not be
Pardon?
spent here. Since it's a directive from the state to collect those funds, are we even sure it's being spent here in Franklin?
Well, it doesn't have to be spent in Franklin, but it would, well, it should be spent on Franklin
It should be.
students, I would think.
Right. I would think
Unless
so.
it's going into some general fund. But my point is, if the Franklin taxpayers are paying for that, we have a right to know what schools it's going to.
Right.
And then, Jim, you also identified about $400,000 of COVID stuff. Is that, how much of that is funded with revenue that we've gotten from different programs that the state and feds provided?
Really, of the things that I outlined, none of that was paid for by anything outside the district other than our regular budget. That part of it would have been covered by the COVID funds that we had budgeted, knowing that we'd have to pay for some things like this. And when we did that in April or May, we didn't know exactly what those would be. But that covered that amount. We did or will get funds through the state. I think it's about $250,000, and we've paired that with purchasing Chromebooks, making sure Chromebooks go to every student through 4K, down through 4K.
And that's in this budget, right?
Right.
With all with the $400,000 that we're spending on COVID, or roughly 400,000, what of that is equipment that we're going to have forever and we're kind of stuck with, and how much of it is personnel and?
What is non-recurring
Yeah,
expenses versus
when are
other?
we,
Good.
what are we getting out of that?
I would say that probably about half of it is on things that will continue and stay in the district, that will be using it. In the case of that, the rest of it is mainly supplies and things that will be used up.
But for example, the technology that we purchased to help with the virtual schooling, things like that, is something that even if we go back to fully in-person, would still, potentially have value and use in the district going forward.
Exactly. The bottle fillers, the sanitizing machines, a lot of those things would continue to be used.
You mentioned the additional bus routes, so those would continue, I guess. What was the need for those in last year's budget? You mentioned something that why would we need to continue that?
Next year, we would have our students back, I would assume. So we would have 1,000 students back that need a ride on the bus. And at that point, the additional routes would handle those students, but there would be more 3 to a seat than there would be this year, where we're only doing 2 to a seat, and we have fewer students to serve on the bus. And in answering the question of how much would continue and not, that was based on the $400,000 worth of things. And then transportation is another one. In the future, we've talked about staffing. Staffing gets readjusted in the future based on if we're back in person, it makes a difference.
I guess the real question is, how sustainable is this? It seems to be that there's a lot of expense here in this budget. We're spending more than we ever have, and is that sustainable going forward? What kind of pullbacks do we see as we go forward? How can we manage this going forward?
But it's sustainable for this year. I think it's sustainable for maybe another year if that's what it takes. I hope it doesn't take another year, maybe another half a year or something like that, and then we kind of move back into all in person. But we can continue this beyond this year. We wouldn't want to do this forever, certainly, but we can sustain this.
Any other questions about the budget? Okay. Hearing none, I'd be looking for a motion to approve the 2020-21 budget.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Larson,
Second.
second by Mr. Persky. Any further discussion? No further discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Budget passes. Next item is refinancing the existing debt for Mr. Milsner.
Whenever it's possible, it makes sense to refinance our long-term debt if we can do that at a lower interest rate. Although our debt is in bonds, it's somewhat similar to refinancing a home mortgage. If you can do that at a lower rate, you can save money over the long term. And we've used many different methods to do this in the past, depending on the circumstances. It's obviously best for our district to have low interest rates at the time of the sale and to not have a lot of competition. To do that, this time we would like to use a process called a parameters resolution. The resolution sets the parameters that need to be met before the bonds can be sold, and the board approves the parameters resolution with the parameters, and then we work with Baird, our consultant, to find the right time to complete the sale when the parameters are met. In this case, the main thing we're looking at is the interest cost not to exceed 2.5%, and really we're looking for that to be less than 2%. And the present value debt service savings minimum of 2%. Right now, if we got the lowest rates that we've seen in the last month, that could be up at 7%. And this could happen, it could happen quickly or it could take a few months. We're looking at the time frame going through January perhaps. And then we would do the sale when it's most advantageous to the district. And Dr. Miller and I would approve it at the point where we get what we're looking for. If we don't meet the parameters, or if the sale just isn't enough savings, then we don't sell and it doesn't go through. Our bond attorney has drafted the parameters resolution so that it meets all the legal requirements. And if the board is in favor of creating the savings by refinancing, we would just need to approve the parameters resolution with a motion. And this is looking at the debt associated with our high school referendum, where we added on to the high school and did renovations. It wouldn't involve the Forest Park bonds. Any questions on that?
Yes. So what's the time frame? This is it's open for what time frame? Till they can, I mean, it has to be done by a certain, I don't think there's a date in here that says that they have a window.
No,
This
we're
is the
looking-
window, you go out there and look for these parameters during this window. Is there a defined window or not?
We're looking at doing this by the end of January as being the best time. I don't believe it's defined specifically.
So it's just kind of assumed, or this?
That's what it is, yeah. That's what we've discussed, that this is the time when the
Doesn't
prices will be
expire.
best.
And if it extends past January and we can get a lower rate, what would be the negative in that regard?
I guess I don't know why we have to make this so complicated. Why don't we just wait till it stabilizes in January and just do a more straightforward refinancing? This to me seems more complicated than it has to be. Why
When
don't we
the-
just wait? If we think this is uncertain, this clearly is responding to uncertainty. Why not wait till it is more certain and do it then?
Because we've seen the price of bonds go up and down, and when they go down, it's a very good rate, and we would like to hit that immediately That's what the parameters resolution allows us to do. If we wait for the rates to stabilize, we're believing that they will stabilize at a higher rate, and they won't make any sense for us to go in at a higher rate. We won't save money. That's why we want to be able to watch the market and jump in when the rate goes down. And if there aren't a lot of sales at the time. Our $20 million sale, if it was up against, let's say, a $400 million bond sale from California, isn't going to get noticed. So what this does is it takes away kind of rolling the dice by picking a date and saying, we're going to do this here, and it allows us to watch the market and jump in when it makes sense and get the best deal for the taxpayers of Franklin.
So you're saying it could happen tomorrow, could happen January, it could happen in March, but we want to be ready for when it happens, so we get the best rate, and we think the best rate is going to be 2%, but we're,
Well, it has to be 2%, right?
it has to be 2% in
2.5.
order to do it.
It's set at 2.5, but there are times in the past month where it's gone down below 2. So that's what we're hoping for, that will continue, that'll come back, and then we'll get that low rate.
It essentially provides us that authority to act when we need to act and not convene the board and lose the opportunity. So that's what you're approving, that authority to act.
And how much are we refinancing? I'm unclear, because the Section 2 shows a schedule that totals $19,620,000, but yet there's an aggregate amount identified that's $21,500,000.
Yeah, I think it's not to exceed the $21,500,000, but I believe the amount will be closer to the high 19 number.
What determines what that number is?
I think when it occurs and what kind of a deal they can put together on how much is in there, they don't want to be short, I think, is the point of putting it at 21.5 is probably the maximum that they could possibly do. It's not the most likely number. It's not the way we're looking at it right now, but it does set a maximum so that we're not doing more than that.
And this doesn't include any defeasance then? It's not wrapped into?
Doesn't include what?
Any defeasance, any prepayment?
That's not part of it, right?
That's a separate action.
The defeasance is separate, yeah.
And when will we do the defeasement then? When are you planning to do that?
That may not, depending on how this works out, it may not occur to actually defease future payments for several years. If we, depending on how this schedule looks, if we can defease later debt, we will probably do that instead. So we're kind of waiting to see how this works out and what the schedule looks like, what we're able to do with the savings that we get before we decide which part would be defeased.
After the new schedule is set?
Right.
There'll be call dates then to allow that, or?
Right, that's what we'd look at. And we may have to wait several years to get closer to it so that we can call that, but that would be the plan, so that we don't have a large uptick in our debt service amount at some future year.
And this cost how much then to do the deal?
Estimating about $215,000 for everything: underwriting, bond counsel, disclosure counsel, official statement.
And the 2 million is a gross number?
Yes.
Did you have a question, Mike?
I lost my train of thought.
Okay.
Yeah, so the 215,000 is budgeted for?
Right. Yeah, it's included.
Have we done this kind of a deal before?
We have not done a parameters resolution before. We have done competitive sales. We've done negotiated sales of different kinds. But this time, given the situation and the market that we're looking at and what we need to achieve to get the best deal for Franklin, that's why we decided the parameters resolution would allow us to do those things, would allow us to jump in when we need to and get that lowest rate when there's not a lot of competition.
And why did you not go out to negotiated rate then, if you were so concerned about the market exposure? Because that, again, will also give you certainty.
Right, but you pick a date certain on the negotiated, and then that's the date that you're going to negotiate, and you go to market, and you look at the different rates, and you get a rate that's equal to, let's say, the best rate at that day. We don't want to set any date in the future that this is going to happen. We want to be able to watch each day and see where the market is, and then jump in at the best time. That's why it's set up this way.
Who watches this for you?
Baird?
Baird.
So really, the only difference is, with the first two, it's more or less locking in. This one has given us flexibility to time the market.
Yes.
You pick a date, try to negotiate something versus watching the market volatility.
Exactly.
Have other districts done this?
I don't have a list, but I would believe that they would have, yeah. It's not a particularly new thing, it just has not fit for us before when we've done sales.
And when would the board be informed then of what actually happened?
Oh, definitely. When this goes through, we would definitely let the board know where it came out and what the actual numbers ended up being.
And was there a reason you didn't refund the other ones?
They're just too new. Forest Park, there's just not enough of that callable to make it worth it.
It's a higher rate too, though. Don't they have a higher rate on those?
It is, but even setting up a future payoff and getting an escrow account and all of that just costs too much money. It eats up the savings on that.
Okay. I'm done.
Okay. Any other questions? You coming up with a question, Clyde?
Well, I was checking the market right now.
No, that's fine. I'm good.
Okay. So I'm looking for a motion to approve the resolution authorizing the issuance and establishing parameters for the sale of not to exceed 21.5 million general obligation refunding bonds.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Larson. Second by Mr. Lewis. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oh, this should be a roll call, shouldn't it, since it's money? Would you do a roll call,
sir?
please?
Absolutely. Mrs. Witkowski,
Aye.
Mr. Lewis,
Aye.
Mr. Sprague,
Aye.
Mrs. Sapersky,
Aye.
sorry. I vote aye. Mr. Gamble?
Aye.
Thank you. 6-0.
Motion passes. Thank you. The treasurer's report, that's available in the board docs library for anyone who cares to review those. Item 10, school board liaison reports. Mrs. Larson.
Yes, we have 5 policies today. The first policy is number 9020, Franklin Community Education and Recreation Department. This is an action item. The change relates to the documentation that is required to qualify for financial assistance. The rec department does not require that parents supply income information. Rather, the determination is based upon other information on aid the family receives or special hardship information which is provided.
And that change is only in the rules, correct?
Yes,
Otherwise,
Yes.
the policy is unchanged.
yes.
It's a motion to reconfirm.
How much is this program used? How often do we get requests for?
Mr. Anderson, would you be able to answer that?
I would say probably half a dozen times a year.
Okay, thank you.
Typically it's in the summer, when you get into the summer camp portion of the more expensive programs.
Okay.
So I would be looking for a motion to reconfirm this policy.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Sprague,
Second.
second by Ms. Witkowski. Any further discussion? Just a voice vote?
Yes.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
All right. Policy number 9320, Franklin Community Education and Recreation Department, fee structure. This is also an action item. The current fee structure is working well, and there are no recommended changes, so I am looking for a motion to reconfirm this policy.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Lewis,
Second.
second by Mr. Sprague. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Policy number 9535, Franklin Community Education and Recreation Department, discipline and disruptive behavior. This is also an action item. There are no changes to the policy language here. The changes were made in the administrative rules pertaining to the duration of time a student can be suspended for disruptive behavior. And on this, I am looking for a motion to reconfirm.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Lewis,
Second.
second by Ms. Spersky. Any discussion?
And the basis for the changes?
Have these been discussed with Mr. Anderson, and he agrees with them, I assume?
He proposed the changes.
Okay.
And they're shorter or?
No longer.
Longer, oh, wow. First offense is 3 days versus.
I apologize, I didn't hear you.
I was just looking to see the changes. The first offense is 3 program dates versus 1 week. And so longer for the second. Is this get used a lot too, or are we?
Not a lot, no. Typically, it's our before and after school program or summer camp.
Oh.
Because they're in it for an entire summer. But knowing that, we also do the communications and verbal warnings and things like that much well before we get to any of the first, second, or third offense for this.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes.
All right. The next policy on the agenda is Policy 4001, Privacy in Locker Rooms and/or Dressing Areas. This is also an action item. The administration recommends the policy is updated to include instructors or supervisors of the recreation department programs, and therefore it will eliminate the need to have a redundant policy, number 9440, Franklin Community Education and Recreation Department, cameras and recording devices prohibited. And I am looking for a motion to approve this policy.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Sprague,
Second.
second by Mr. Lewis. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
All right. Last one, policy 9440, Franklin Community Education and Recreation Department cameras and recording devices prohibited. This is an action item. The recommendation is to eliminate this policy because it is redundant to the previous policy we just approved, 4001. So I am looking for a motion to eliminate policy 9440.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Lewis,
Second?
second by Ms. Witkowski. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes.
That concludes my report.
Thank you. Item 6, board liaison reports.
I attended the Franklin Educational Foundation meeting last Friday morning, virtually, of course. Of note, congratulations, Mrs. Yank. I see you back there in the corner. She is a new member of the board of that. The Educational Foundation is struggling to get funds because all of their fundraisers have basically been canceled or gone virtual. So if you are interested in that organization keeping going, please follow along with them and find out how you can donate. I also attended the CISA meeting last week, also virtually. Not much of note of that meeting. I think it was 15 minutes. It might have been 17. The guy who is the director of that really gets through things quickly. I will send the information from that meeting to the board members.
Thank you. Anyone else? Item G, school and community engagement reports. I know it's kind of hard in COVID times to do that.
And we still can't show up, just
No.
asking.
No, you can meet virtually at any of
I
the
just,
building
I hear
principals.
some of our parents talk about how they're amazed at how things work, you know. It would be neat to see how things work, but.
Is it possible to join a virtual class and do like a school visit virtually by joining a class?
Potentially. I actually haven't even spent much time in virtual classes because I believe that, requires some level of introduction to the families and to the students, but potentially.
Okay. Item 11, school board meeting debriefing. Any comments from school board members?
I just want to say, I think, Debbie, your policy reports are, I think you stepped up and you provide the background and what's going on. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
I don't know if you got good coaching or you,
It's all good coaching.
but I've noticed it. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Anyone else? I would like to commend Mr. Melsner and the administration for the budget that we were able to pass without increasing the cost of the education on our taxpayers. I think that's a remarkable step, given the current climate.
Is there a way that is communicated to the general public and to use that as a positive, that the school district is doing something, we're thinking of the taxpayers?
Yes. So the next edition of the Opening Doors publication that goes to all residents will have an article about the fact that the school district has done a very good job of short-term and long-term planning and fiscal management, and therefore there's no tax increase. So yes, that will go out the end of November.
Item 12, future agenda items. Principal action plan update from Franklin High School, November 11th. Early college credit and Start College Now request approvals for November 11th. New course approvals for November 11th. Enrollment and staffing report, also November 11th. The 2021-22 school calendar, November 11th. Then the principal action plan update for the Forest Park Middle School, December 9th. The board clerk's report and election notice for December 9th. Communications update, December 9th. Annual assessment report, December 9th. Debt refinancing, December 9th. And board discussion for the process of budget review and budget information, December 9th.
Just a question on, the principal action plan update, that's really the school improvement plan, is that what that?
Right, that's a high school team. They'll provide information about the plan in writing to you, and then hopefully provide, I don't want to say a demonstration, but engaging presentation of some aspect of the plan.
And high school is November and
Middle school's December.
December, okay.
Yes. Okay. And I'm looking for a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Witkowski,
Second.
second by Ms. Larson. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, meeting is adjourned at 7:31.